Welcome to another teaching from perfectingtheworld.com.
Good evening. So good to see you. Shavua Tov. Happy New Week. We are continuing our learning on the topic of food boundaries on Israel's table and identity boundaries within the Torah. We're looking at a number of holiness boundaries and how they relate to each other. And we're going to be focusing this week primarily on the question of who is the forgotten stranger of Israel's gates. The next few evenings here, we'll be looking at the topic of receiving Nevelah. Who is authorized to receive Nevelah as a gift within Israel's gates? This is going to be fun and challenging. And the reality is, what we're looking at here might very much relate to who you are and to your identity within the Torah system of boundaries. Okay, and this might be your story, what we're unfolding here. We're teeing up a distinction today between the ger mentioned in 14:21 of Deuteronomy and the Nokri. We've teed up other parts of this process. We teed up the difference between clean and unclean in the Torah, the difference between biblically permissible or kosher and clean and unclean in the Torah. We saw the functions of cleanness or altar readiness throughout the Torah. We've looked at the definition of Nevelah. Specifically, we have honed in on the idea of how food enters Israel's table through the process of altar slaughter or kosher slaughter. And we're at the point now where we have defined this term Nevelah. We've understood that Nevelah is meat that did not enter the table through the altar method of slaughter. That is, it's meat that did not receive a kosher slaughter. As we've learned, there is a command against the Israelite eating Nevelah. This commandment reads, Lo tochelu kol Nevelah, do not eat any Nevelah. Lager asher b'shareka, the ger at your gates. Titana, you may give. Wa'akla, to eat. Umakler lanokri, or you may sell it to the foreigner. Ki am kodosh ata ladonai Eloheka, for you are a holy people to the Lord your God. Lo tevashel gedi bechelev imo, you should not cook a kid in the milk of its mother. You can see we have three distinct boundaries and categories in this verse. We have Isreal, who is told not to eat the Nevelah. We have the ger, who is able to receive the Nevelah as a gift. We have the Nokri, who can be sold the Nevelah. As we've mentioned before, Nevelah is not putrid meat. It is not roadkill. It would not be ethical to go take the chicken that dies overnight in your coop and give it to your neighbor to eat. That would be potentially unethical, not wholesome, and not healthy. What Nevelah is an animal that most likely the intent was there to give it a proper slaughter. And as often happens within the world of kosher slaughter, you have a God-fearing butcher, and something happens in the kosher slaughter process, and the animal dies of something less than a kosher slaughter. That animal, that kosher species, as mentioned, al pei shemua, per tradition, we understand that the Nevelah of Deuteronomy 14:21 is a permissible species, although, as we've shown lexically, you could argue that it's any species. But per tradition, we hold this as a permissible species that died of something other than the altar method of slaughter. So it dies of something other than kosher slaughter. So it could be a bullet wound, it could be an electric shock, it could be suffocation in water, strangulation, it could be blunt force to the head, it could be poisonous gas, injection, whatever the method is that it is dying of, it is not the kosher method of slaughter. And as I've mentioned already, this meat is not unhealthy meat. This is perfectly acceptable, healthy meat that enters the table through something other than the method of kosher slaughter. To illustrate this further, okay, this shows the tripart allocation of the Nevelah. First of all, the Isur Achilath Nevelah, the prohibition against eating Nevelah for the Israelite. Okay, this is both for the native born and the one who becomes an Israelite. We'll discuss that later. It's also then it is permitted as a gift to the ger, Bishareka, the ger at the gate, and then the Nochri may purchase this. We saw last week in our last session the boundaries within Israel. The Nochrim are not in a positive relationship to Israel's social order. They are passers through, so to speak. They are doing commerce with Israel at a time that we are in the land, but they have not positively attached themselves to Israel, nor have they attached themselves to Israel's God. I'm actually answering one of the questions we're going to ask here later. The Ger Nevelah has visibly entered Israel's order. And as we will learn, they are permitted as part of Israel's welfare system to receive Nevelah. Moving ahead, probably into topics that will come up in the following week, the Ger Yisrael, this is the Ger who has become an Israelite, and the Ezrach Israel, this is the native-born Jew, the native-born Israelite. That these individuals are not permitted to eat Nevelah. But you can see that there's an architecture. It's an architecture that leads to assent. It leads to Israel's altar if it's followed. And I'm not saying by saying that it leads to Israel's altar, I'm not saying that the individual needs to satisfy the conditions of making it to Israel's altar if they're born outside of the system. Okay, we'll get into more of that later. The an important consideration here is that these gates are not blockaded. Okay, Israel, the Jewish people, have been under siege, and we have owned that reality. We have blockaded our gates. In contrast, many in the Torah pursuant world have denied that these gates exist. Theologically, they have flatlined the boundaries of holiness. Just as many of you have seen in the Torah pursuant world, you've known this already. You've known this. You've seen how the Christian world abolished the distinction between what's holy and profane on the table. Let's say regarding chazir, pig. You've seen this flatlining of distinctions, okay, between holy time and common time. And the big project of retrieval of the Torah pursuant awakening has been to acknowledge these boundaries. But one of the boundaries that has continued to be profaned and violated, primarily because of a theological placement, is the idea that these gates are gone, that because of particular beliefs, because of a particular doctrine, let's say, for example, of justification, that a person no longer has to acknowledge these gates because the gates have been crushed down, they've been abolished, and the boundaries no longer exist. The reality is, these boundaries, if they're taken away, there's no way to ascend. These boundaries are the architecture of ascent. And to demolish the gates, to flatline identities, is to remove and to rob you away from the opportunity to ascend into Israel's social order, however that looks. We saw on Friday the Nochri. It says that the text reads, "O machor the Nochri," he may sell it to a Nochri. The Israelite may sell the Nevelah to a Nochri. We saw how the word Nochri conveys the idea of strangeness, foreignness, otherness, hilarity. It is specifically attached to the idea of idolatry, of the El Nechar, the foreign god. It is specifically attached to the idea of rival systems of worship, rival liturgies, rival cults, rival avodas, services toward other administrations and other gods. Now, in contrast, the word ger, just to look at this word at the basic lexical level, and we'll be unpacking this further. The ger, okay, where the nokri is the alien, okay, the ger is also a sojourner or a foreigner. But the difference is in this. The ger is sojourning within an area. Okay, he is dwelling as a non-native. I actually don't want to include this to reside temporarily because that's not inherent in the meaning. I will correct that in future iterations of this, but the ger is someone who dwells as a non-native. In many cases, the ger is seeking asylum. Okay, in times past, it may have been physical asylum. In the present time, it's often spiritual asylum. This is a person who is seeking asylum among another people. We often call this the idea of immigration. They're seeking to live under the protection of another community. One of the best ways to translate this word ger is an immigrant. It's worth noting, and we will spend more time on this later, that this word ger in the Septuagint Greek translation of the Hebrew Torah was often translated as the word proselyte or convert. It often takes on the meaning of convert, and part of the reason why is because this person who is immigrating into Israel's social order quite often goes the route of becoming part of Israel, fully part of Israel, not just entering Israel's order, but becoming part of Israel. So the ger is the sojourner. Now let me emphasize this, and this will make more sense in time. The ger is the foreigner, the sojourner, who has become visible to Israel's public Torah social order through accountability to Israel's gates. This will make more sense in time, but I want to emphasize that the ger has become visible to Israel's social order. Okay. To look at the contrast here, the ger is the sojourner who has entered into Israel's public order and is accountable within that order. The Nachri is the foreigner. He's the alien, the stranger. He's not recognized as belonging within Israel's social order. He's not accountable to Israel's social order. Okay, he is more or less, for lack of better terms, a passerby or a passer through. In contrast, the ger is seeking to make residence or asylum within Israel's social order. Okay, I think you can see some of the differences here in this particular contrast, where the Nachri is a passerby, the ger sha'ar. Okay, this is a further elaboration or clarification of who this ger is. The ger sha'ar is the ger at the gates. This is a ger who has positively aligned him or herself with Israel's social order. Okay, and this, again, I'm holding back on a lot. Now, I want to give, without many words, give this contrast. We've seen already that the idea of the Nachri is related specifically to the idea of idolatry. Okay, the El Nechar, the foreign god, Elohe Nechar, the foreign god, the gods of foreignness. In contrast, the ger is positively related to, is positively accountable to Israel's social order. Now, take that in mind, and some of you, I think, are already going to have your answer ready. Get your fingers warmed up. I'd like you to answer in the comments below this following question. What is the difference between the Nochri and the ger? What distinguishes them specifically? Okay, we've seen I've already given some really significant hints here in today's session and in previous sessions. What is the difference between a Nochri and a ger? And what distinguishes the two of them from each other? This week will be focused primarily on answering that question, but feel free, you have full permission to be wrong in your answer. I would love to know where you're at. I'd love to check for understanding and see where your thoughts are going and see if you have where your minds are going on this question. If you like this content and would like to learn more with us and become part of our online learning community, a community where you will find a seat and an opportunity to advance this learning and to become part of a community that is growing, go to perfectingtheworld.com and you will be able to register and become part of our online forums, become part of our live classes, and to continue to learn with full textual seriousness and fully apprentice to Israel's social order. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock, where we will start to answer this question: what is the difference between the Nokri and the Ger? Have a fantastic evening. Thank you for joining us.